Today, we have a very special guest with us. After surviving a life-threatening accident in 1989, he went on to write the best-selling book called The Millions Within, work alongside other known mentors like Proctor, Marianne Morrisey, Tony Robbins for decades, and made his name as one of the architects of the coaching and personal growth industry itself. Thank you for being with us today, David. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. I want to dive right in because I've got some really specific questions because you and I have a similar backstory and that we were both in a life-changing accident. So tell
Uh,
me a little bit about what your life was like before the accident.
so here's the thing about this accident. The accident was actually a wake-up call for me. I quit high school when I was 17. I got married very, very early and had two children right away with really no learned skill or education to be able to get a job outside of something slightly above minimum wage. So I was driving a forklift for a living. And then I was going through kind of a rough time. I was really trying to figure out how do I get out of this situation because I went bankrupt, had my car repossessed, and my wife and the kids had to leave our apartment in the middle of the night because they wouldn't let me out of my lease and we couldn't afford to live there anymore. So we had to move to a much lower neighborhood because we just could not afford our bills. I mean, it was that bad. And during that process, I did go on a little trip where I was water skiing with my parents and my aunt and my uncle. And I got separated from the boat and I got sucked through a dam on the Illinois River in Marseilles, Illinois. And I was only one of two people at that time that had ever survived going through it. And the person that survived before me, I believe he became a paraplegic. I mean, he was damaged that bad after going through it. So it was significant. I broke my back slightly, not in a obviously a paralyzing way. Recovered relatively quick, but it changed my viewpoint on a few things. And so I'm in my early 20s when this happens, right? When you're in your 20s, you think you're invincible. You're not thinking about dying or anything like that. It made me very aware that there's an urgency to life. And if we're going to do something, we better get on with it because we really never know how long we're going to be here. And most 20-year-olds don't ever think about that. Like, I got all the time in the world, right? Well, yeah, maybe, but maybe not, right? I was having an amazing day that day. Like, that day was just fun for me. And then it went from fun to fighting for my life in a split second. And that really surprised me that your life can change that fast in a pretty horrific way if you're not paying attention to what you're doing. So the urgency of that really stuck in my mind. After I healed, I went back to work on the forklift and I was trying to figure out, what do I do with this? Like, it seems significant, this event in my life. But nothing was getting better. It was still progressively getting worse as far as my circumstances. And then one day I was so miserable. I didn't feel well. I worked nights. It was February in Chicago. That day I got reprimanded twice when I got to work because I was not doing a good job at what I was doing. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, I just lost it. And I broke down crying on my forklift in the back of this trailer while I was loading it. And I said, God, show me anything to get out of here. I don't know what to do. Please show me something. And in that moment, a voice in my head said, David, change your attitude. And I stopped crying. It was very distinct and loud in my mind. Change your attitude. I was like, what is this? I've never had that experience before. And I thought, is that possible that is actually the answer? That would actually significantly do something to change the circumstances that I'm actually in? Because, I even got to the point where a lot of people don't get to, where I started asking people for help. I'm like, look, I've got a problem. I don't know how to solve this. Would you please help me? And what I didn't understand was I was asking the wrong people, but I didn't know that at the time. So I was asking adults, people that were older than me, people that were my parents' age, actually my parents also. And everybody said the same thing. You shouldn't have quit high school. I'm like, yes, I got that message. Very good. What do I do now? And they all said, work as hard as you can at the job that you have, work all the overtime that you can, and be as good as an employee and just stick it out. And I thought, that's not going to work. I mean, I need a different answer. So in 80 or in 89, early 90s, there was no internet yet, right? So if I wanted to go to school, I couldn't go to school online. I had to go to a physical school, which took time. and it took money. And I didn't have either because I was working 6.5 days a week. So what I did was I said, what is this attitude thing? And I had heard this my whole life because when I was a little kid, the teachers would call my father in because I wasn't doing well in school. And they would say, listen, David's a pretty bright guy, but he has a terrible attitude. And if he had a better attitude, he would probably do really well at school. Now, my parents obviously didn't know how to help me change this because what would happen was I'd go home and they would ground me until the next report card, which meant this: I couldn't go out, I couldn't do any other activities. I had to sit in my room from the time I came home until like dinner or something, but then I had to go back in my room. And I had to do that from one report card to another. And the whole idea was I had to study and bring my grades up. And there was no help, really no help at all. So nobody was teaching me how to study. Nobody was recognizing that I may have a little bit of a problem studying. I had a retention issue on things that I was not interested in, and it never changed. And that my whole childhood was like this until I got to old enough where I could push back and say, that's not happening. I'm just not going to do that anymore. So I took the gentleman that owned the company that I worked for, which was the largest food importer in the United States. And there was a story, a very famous story about this guy. He started the company in his garage, like literally in his garage. And he built it into this enormous, huge company. A matter of fact, most of the foods that we get from other countries today are because of this person, right? And here's what I said. What's the difference between him and I? And I thought, you know something? I hate what I do. He must have loved what he did in order to stay with it. And if he loved what he did, he probably did a really good job at the actual work that he had to do. And I recognized that I was not doing it. I was so angry and bitter and disappointed inside. I was not caring a bit about the quality of my work. I was taking it out. Actually, I wanted to do bad because I was so frustrated. And there was another thing that kind of really rocked my consciousness. And that was, I worked in a warehouse where probably 75% of the people in the warehouse didn't even speak English. And this guy, whenever he would walk through the warehouse, and he'd always be in a suit and he would look fantastic, he would never walk past any employee without stopping and saying, hi, how's your family? How you doing? Anything I can do for you? And that was the opposite of what I was taught that wealthy people were actually like. So that like the bells went off in my mind. And I said, you know something? I am going to treat everybody with total respect. So I changed 3 things: treat everybody with total respect, do every job to the best of my ability, and act like I love what I do. And the most significant thing in my life began to happen that completely turned my mind around. I went from making $20,000 a year the day that I started changing my attitude. A month later, I was making $62,000 a year. I couldn't believe that this change happened. I mean, it happened that fast. And everybody around me said, you know, you were really lucky. Like, you better not screw this up. And I would be like, yeah. But in my mind, I knew it wasn't luck. I knew that I did something, but I didn't understand how it worked or why it worked. And that sent me in a new path in life because now I needed to find out. So I began to study. And I went on a journey of studying for 7 years with all kinds of people, some of the people that you read in my biography there. And I learned what I had done. And I was helping other people. And then in 1999, I decided that I was going to start the business that I have today. That's 22 years ago. And it's been a fabulous journey. Just we've helped so many people.
That is so great. Do you think that your boss, was he like the instrumental person in you changing everything, turning it around?
My boss? Did you say my boss?
Yeah, the boss that you worked for?
No, he
Oh,
wasn't. I didn't even know him.
oh,
I just
okay.
picked him as an example of somebody I thought had a good attitude because I didn't know what an attitude was really, right? And I thought, who represents a good attitude to me? Because everybody in my personal life, I would say, no, they didn't have a good attitude at all. But this guy exemplified something that I could actually see without even knowing him. And those were the 3 things that I came up. Never talked to the man. I've never had a conversation about him.
That is so, you know what's so great about that is that his example, without you even reaching out to him, like that it stood out so much to you that you were able to exemplify those traits without even having a conversation with him. I think that's
Yes,
amazing.
it is amazing. It is amazing. You wouldn't, I mean, I sit here today and I tell this story and I think back to the day that my income changed. And I would literally sit on my couch at home with the check that I would get for working. And I would look at my name next to that number. And it was almost like, am I in a dream? Am I going to wake up and find out that this is actually not real? I could not figure out how this happened. It was stunning how it happened. And then everything just kept getting better and better. So I switched companies that I worked for. And because this opportunity came to me within those 30 days, and I went to work for another company, and that was what I got paid. And then in 3 years, I was running that company. And I started off as a truck driver for that company. When I left, I was in charge of expanding that company across the country.
That's incredible. Do you think that an entrepreneur's business is a reflection of what's going on in their mind?
I think so. I do think so. It's very different. It's a very different way of thinking. If you understand the way most people in the world are raised, considering that most of the people in the world are living at the poverty level or below. If you raise it up to working class, middle class individuals, even the professional class, which is more educated, right? They're still raised with a value set that's all about survival. And it does not translate into business owner or entrepreneur because it's a completely different way of thinking, seeing the world, and recognizing opportunity.
Do you think that's the most common reason for people failing or just giving up?
Yes, I do. I absolutely do. And the reason for that is that if you're raised with let's say you're raised middle class and you've never been exposed to the way an entrepreneur or a business owner thinks or what they have to deal with every day, in your mind, you have been taught to see the world and react to the world with the idea that it could all collapse at any moment. And you need to be a certain way in order to keep getting paid. And like, you're not in charge of your income when you're working for somebody else. You're not. You get an income. You show up based on an agreement to trade time for money for an income. But basically, the owner of that company can fire you at any point, and then you're out of a job. So there is a deep insecurity that runs through people because here's something that they do not know. They don't know how to create their own income. And when you don't know how to do that, you're always living with this idea like, is this real? What happens if I don't do it? What happens if I fail? What happens if I don't have insurance? Like all this crazy stuff is going through your mind that you have to not only try to work on, but if nobody's telling you how to think different and you're trying to build a business, when something goes wrong, it may be so devastating to you that you don't know how to become resourceful and meet the challenge to be able to move ahead. I have a philosophy. People that fail don't fail, they quit. Something gets triggered in their life that causes them to say, this is no longer a value to me. I need to go back where I came from. They quit.
Mhm. I completely agree with that. I think there's a lot of people that it's just like the saying goes that a lot of people quit before the miracle happens.
True. That's very true.
What do you think your unique skill is that has helped you become and stay successful?
I learned how to think successfully. I have all kinds of skills. I'm an unbelievable salesman. Um, I am a great presenter. I'm a great public speaker, professional speaker. I understand very much how to build a business, how to scale a business, how to make money. I could teach people how to make money really fast. I do a lot of things really well. But if it comes back down to what is the number one thing that I know how to do that allows all that to be possible, is that I spent years learning how to think successfully. And that changed everything because not only did it teach me how to overcome problems, I learned how to see the world in a completely different way than I was totally ignorant to prior to that.
What do you think the biggest problem that you've seen businesses have to solve or work on with this last year, which has been unprecedented?
Yeah. So when I mean, we've never faced anything like we have now. However, there's one thing that I talked about when the COVID thing first hit that really concerned me. And I talked publicly about it for about 8 weeks. And the idea was that the foundation of how we understand business and commerce and money to switch hands, to go back and forth, has been shattered. Like when we went in lockdown, it shattered what we knew about actually how to operate, right? So if a person didn't understand how to think differently in a situation and they were consumed by fear, they would be paralyzed in that situation. And so many people were. There are people that their lives are just devastated by this, and they had good businesses prior. So I was teaching people how to think, and I was doing it for free. I was just doing these live things over the internet, trying to help people, really direct them in how to think about their situation so that they could get out. But the fear became so paralyzing for individuals that some of them could not get themselves to think correctly. But the idea would be, it's actually a very simple idea. It's almost so simple that a person could think that it's not valuable. Number one, if you can move your mind from fear to gratitude about whatever's happening, right? All of the media is pushing fear. They have been for 18 months. If you could move your mind from fear to gratitude, it would allow you to see something very interesting, which would be, how do you recognize value in yourself that you can take and help somebody else, so that you can see how do I take what I know and change it to help somebody in a situation that I'm not familiar with. But it requires that you look at it and think about it, and not think about why you can't do something. So people get stuck in the idea why I can't do it. It becomes very evident why I can't do it. All the systems collapsed around me. Okay, great. Now let's look at what you can do. And the people that did very well. And the people that didn't lost most everything.
What would you say to someone who is losing hope in their business? If they're, we're 18 months into all of this and they're feeling overwhelmed, what's something that could give them hope?
Okay, here's something that can give them hope. Everything in the universe operates by the law of cause and effect. So if your business is in trouble, if you're in trouble, that is an effect. It's not a cause. Something else is causing that, right? If you want to change, you need to, number one, identify the outcome of the change that you want, and then understand there is a cause for that change. So the idea then is to start thinking about, what is the cause of the change that you actually want to make? And here's the one main thing that they need to do. If they're having trouble with that, right? What are they resisting being, doing, or having in their life? Because it's not that the answer is not there. It's not that the answer is not in the universe. It's that they're resisting seeing it for some reason. And it's probably something attached to some kind of fear in their life.
I'm so glad that you said that. I feel like there's so many people out there that are really looking for a beacon, that, they're looking for someone to turn to. And I know that you have a podcast. So tell us a little bit more about that. Where can people find out more information or listen into the podcast?
Be happy to. It's called the Successful Mind Podcast. It's on all different podcast channels and everything. And the thing about the podcast is I give the best information primarily on how to learn to think successfully. So like millions of people go to this podcast, and that's really what they're learning. And it's totally free. Like there's no charge. It's some of the best information that I have, and I just offer it for that. And if they want to learn more, I mean, my website's davidneagle.com. I'm not that hard to find, but really go there and think about the things that I'm presenting to the world. Because if you learn how to think like that, it can change everything in your life, and it can do it really fast. I went from 20,000 a year to 62 in 1 month, and I didn't even know what I was doing, right? I was what they call an unconscious competent. If you know a little bit, you can do so much as long as you actually apply it.
That's great. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to share everything with us. I appreciate it, and I know that our listeners will too. And for anyone listening, I'm going to go ahead and link all of David's links inside the show notes so you can have quick reference. Thank you again for being here. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. A lot of fun.